Hi, this is John Harcher, and welcome to episode 47 of Keep on Groovy. Today we'll be finishing up the Experience's career in late May and June 1969, a time that also coincided with the coming together of what will become the Band of Gypsys. Episode 47, the Jimi Hendrix Experience U.S. Tour, May-June 1969. Okay, no need to wait around. Let's get right back into this. On May 21st, Jimi brought Billy Cox and Buddy Miles into the record plant with engineer Dave Ragno to, well, have a party. Somewhere in there, they also got some jamming done. Buddy even played the guitar on one of them. They tried out some takes of Earth Blues, but never got far. Maybe to get things reset, the trio did Bleeding Heart, and this one clicked. This is the version that ended up on the Blues album, and it's a very solid take. The band then tried a few takes of Hear My Train A-Comin'. One of them, they just caught lightning in a bottle. The sound was perfect, and Jimi's solo was stratospheric. Then the track broke down without an ending. Now, it turns out both Alan Douglas and Experience Hendrix listened to this take and wanted to get it out to the public. Douglas possibly wanted it to be on the Blues album, maybe in place of the Rainbow Bridge Live version. So to create an ending, he took the April 9th take of the Experience and grafted that ending onto the proto Band of Gypsys version. However, mixing Buddy and Mitch on the same track just doesn't work. The difference is very distinct. So it was left off, but it ended up being booted. It did provide a service, though. It showed that some parts of the end of the April 9th version were edited out of the one on both sides of the sky. Now, Experience Hendrix did some editing of their own to create a full version. They just took the ending of an earlier take. The mix is a little abrupt, but works better than taking the ending from a completely different band. They finished up with another stab at Earth Blues and a take of Villanova Junction Blues. It fell apart after a few minutes, but the first minute and 45 were solid enough for Experience Hendrix to use it for the final track of People, Hell, and Angels. The next night, the trio came with Jimi's on and off girlfriend, Devin Wilson. They did a 20-minute hybrid version of Message to Love and Earth Blues called Message from Nine to the Universe. Partway through, Devin came in and pitched in with some vocal stylizings would be the best word, but there was a definite sense of energy and fun to it. Alan Douglas edited it in more than half and got rid of the vocals when he made it the title track of the 1980 Jam album, Nine to the Universe, obviously dropping the Message 2-part. This really needs to be put out in full. I don't care if it's on a box or a dagger release. It may be jamming, but it's the source for Message of Love. It developed from here. He'd also been working on Earth Blues already, so this may have been the first solid take of it. Come on, Experience Hendrix, figure out a way. After that, it was an extended West Coast swing that swung way out. First up was a stop in Seattle. Lots of family members were in attendance. We don't have a recording or full set list, but reports are the band was in fine form. Setlist.com has Come On, Hear My Train A-Comin', Foxy Lady, Red House, I Don't Live Today, Fire, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child. Ultimate Hendrix has from Red House forward with Foxy Lady and Star Spangled Banner in place of Fire. Too bad there isn't a readily available recording of this. On the other hand, the show the next night has not only been available, but officially released in full. Almost. Saturday night, May 24th, is the San Diego show that's yielded many a definitive version, in some people's opinions. The show opened with Fire and Hey Joe, a little on the lackluster side for me, but they were okay. But Spanish Castle Magic is when things really got cooking. An extended version that ran over 10 minutes and interpolated Sunshine of Your Love. It was solid from beginning to end. Feeding off of that energy, the band moved into Red House, lasting over 13 minutes. It was the ultimate version, featuring all the different movements Jimi had added in along the way. Then, barely stopping, they went into I Don't Live Today in an almost 7-minute performance that included a little bit of the Star Spangled Banner in the jam section. Then came the usual finale of Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child, all performed with great gusto. Well, Voodoo Child slips a little bit towards the end of an extended version, but it ends solidly. Like the LA Forum show the month before, this was recorded by Wally Heider's remote recording studio for possible use. 1972, Red House was released on In the West and was a highlight of that album. A decade later on Jimi Hendrix concerts, I Don't Live Today was included as the second track and later ended up on the Kiss the Sky compilation. The majority of the show was released on the Stages box set in 1991 to represent 1969. And as I've mentioned on earlier episodes, for some reason, they did not include Foxy Lady. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it performance-wise. In fact, it's actually among the better ones, though not quite as good as LA. Then in 2001, most of the set ended up on the expanded In the West. It included Fire, Spanish Castle Magic, Red House, I Don't Live Today, and Voodoo Child as a replacement for the Royal Albert Hall version for whatever reason. The next day, they played the San Jose Pop Festival at the Santa Clara Fairgrounds. After a lengthy tune-up, they opened up the show with Hear My Train A-Comin', an odd choice but a very enthusiastic rendition. Probably one of the best the Experience ever did. Fire was next, sort of. After the first verse, Jimi goes into an extended solo that briefly comes back to the main riff before Mitch dives in with a solo of his own. Then it quietly morphs into Spanish Castle Magic before the song breaks out on its own. It then mimics the show from the night before with Red House and I Don't Live Today, Foxy Lady, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child all done back to back. Red House is about 10 minutes. I Don't Live Today has a little Star Spangled Banner snippet included. Foxy Lady gets to the solo, then the tape cut, and we jump to the Purple Haze solo. We do get the whole Voodoo Child, and it's a doozy. It starts out normally for the first 7 minutes or so, then Jimi slows it down and goes off in his own little world with a wild solo that makes its way into a little bit of a Villanova Junction-esque section, then back to Voodoo Child, then into the proto-Message of Love riff, A Little Room Full of Mirrors, A Bit of Sunshine of Your Love, and then back to Voodoo Child, and a rousing finish 22 minutes later. After that, Jimi and the band took a week off and headed out to Hawaii for a couple of shows at the Waikiki Shell. They were scheduled to do 2 shows, they ended up doing 3. There's a bit of confusion over a tape that's out there for one of the shows. It says it's from May 30th, but according to Ultimate Hendrix, Jimi played a few songs. They have Foxy Lady, Red House, and I Don't Live Today listed. Setlist.com adds Fire at the beginning. Then he ended the show due to technical issues. The band promised to do a makeup show, which they did on Sunday. So what's on the tape that's out there doesn't match this situation. So maybe it's from the next night. One of the commenters on the YouTube page for the show says there's no known tape of the 31st, but what's there doesn't sound like a bad show like the 30th. So I'll review the tape as if it's from the 31st. The Loverman sounded okay. It's hard to tell from the tape. It's a little muffled. Hear My Train A-Comin' exists for about 2 seconds. Fire sounded pretty good as well. You can clearly hear Noel joining in on a chorus. The tape warps at the end but finishes. Then it picks up right before the first verse of Stone Free, then cuts out right before the solo. It then cuts to the intro of Foxy Lady next, and we get the whole song there. Spanish Castle Magic is pretty good, but then right as Jimi comes back into the verse, the tape ends. Unless you're a diehard, I really wouldn't seek this tape out. Now, Setlist.com has Johnny B. Good starting off the show, but considering you hear the intro and tune up on the tape, I kind of doubt it was there. You also have the show ending with Purple Haze, while Ultimate Hendrix has the songs from the night before, followed by Stone Free, Star Spangled Banner, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child. Your guess is as good as mine as to what's correct. As mentioned before, the band were good to their word and played the makeup show on Sunday, June 1st. No tape for this. Both Setlist and Ultimate Hendrix have Foxy Lady, Red House, Purple Haze, and Voodoo Child. Setlist also has Room Full of Mirrors stuck in the middle of all that, but who knows. After that show, the band took most of the next 3 weeks off. Jimi, however, kept himself a little busy. On June 8th, Eddie Kramer flew out to Wally Heider's studio in LA to go through the live tapes from Royal Albert Hall, the LA Forum, and San Diego Arena with Jimi to see if they could put together a live album to settle the whole PPX Ed Chopin mess. One of the first things they mixed was Little Wing from Royal Albert Hall. They knew even back then they had a winner. He then mixed Purple Haze, or was it 2 Purple Hazes? According to Ultimate Hendrix, it says the Star Spangled Banner and Purple Haze were mixed from the San Diego show. but the Star Spangled Banner was only done in San Diego, a little bit in I Don't Live Today. Both songs, however, were done in LA. Now here's where it gets even more confusing. On the Purple box from 2000, they had a number of vintage mixes from this era, including Purple Haze from San Diego. No Star Spangled Banner in sight. Then on West Coast Seattle Boy, 10 years later, they included the combo, but it said that Star Spangled Banner was mixed on the 15th, yet Purple Haze was mixed on the 8th, the same day as San Diego. I think it's a typo, and both the combo from LA and the standalone version from San Diego were mixed on the 8th just to give them some options. On the 9th, they mixed I Don't Live Today from LA, and it says Red House from San Diego was reviewed, but nothing is said if it was actually mixed. Then on the 10th, they redid I Don't Live Today, and also did Hear My Train A-Comin' under It's Getting My Heart Back Together Again, Guys, from Royal Albert Hall. One wonders if they did any more because what's there was enough for a long album side. If they did mix Red House, they would need at least one more song to make it even a short album. Whatever they did, though, ended up being put aside. On the 15th, someone labeled them as outtakes, and Mike Jeffrey made the decision to have Reprise release a modified version of Smash Hits in the US, so at least they got one of their albums taken care of. This would still leave the PPX album to deal with, but another problem for another day. On Friday, June 20th, the Experience was paid $100,000 to headline that day's concert at the Newport Pop Festival in Northridge, California. The band opened with a more prevalent Stone Free, which they stretched out quite a bit. Then, at about 5 minutes in, Mitch goes into a drum solo. After a minute, Jimi does the opening of Star Spangled Banner, then stops. The band sort of hums for 20 or 30 seconds before Jimi starts into Are You Experienced? It's a relatively short one in comparison to those in 1968, about 5.5 minutes. Then it goes into a quiet little jam we've heard before, can't quite place it. Then goes back into Stone Free to finish up. Jimi sounds a little off though, supposedly the crowd was getting a little rowdy. To try to get things back on track, he starts up Sunshine of Your Love. He messes up, then tries again to get things going in the right direction. About 2.5 minutes in, Jimi's guitar squeals and he stops while Noel and Mitch do their parts in the middle. Jimi comes back in around 4 minutes, then back out, comes back in, and then it stops. As Mitch tries to cover for a minute, Jimi then breaks into Fire. It makes it all the way towards the end before some technical issues spring up before Jimi can bring it to a close. Slowing things down, he goes in to Hear My Train A-Comin', then stops to berate the audience for acting like animals. After a few minutes, he finally starts the song, and it's probably the slowest version ever. He's doing it, but taking his time to get there. Then, right as he gets going after the last verse, the tape fades out. It comes back into the opening of Red House. They go through it. It's a little shorter than a lot of versions in this era, but probably the best of the evening so far. They move right into Foxy Lady, which holds up for about 2/3 of the way through, then stumbles to a finish. Jimi slows it down again and pulls out Like a Rolling Stone, which hadn't been done in quite a while at that point. It was okay, but comes to an abrupt end rather than the usual play out. Voodoo Child was the penultimate song, done more slowly than most of the live versions, more like the studio version. Towards the end, Mitch goes into another drum solo. As he winds down, Jimi kicks into Purple Haze, and 4 minutes later, bludgeons it to an end. With that, the show came to a close. It wasn't a total disaster, but it was far from their finest hour. Jimi obviously was not happy with the way things went down. So on Sunday, he hoped to make up for it and showed up to jam. He joined Buddy Miles, Eric Burden, and Tracy Nelson from the band Mother Earth, and for 2 hours, they just played. It started out with something Jimi called Earth vs. Space. It was a medley of Gypsy Eyes, Keep on Grooving, Red House, and a very early nebulous Machine Gun. I didn't really hear it, but maybe bits and pieces in there. You know, actually I didn't hear Red House in there either, but they said that's what's in there. After that finished, they did the things I used to do, more along the lines of the original as compared to the one they did with Johnny Winter about 6 weeks earlier. In fact, it sounds a lot like the way Stevie Ray Vaughan did it on Couldn't Stand the Weather. Unfortunately, it fades out and comes back into Buddy doing what Buddy does. Everybody clap your hands, stomp your feet, and sing it now. We got to live together. So that's where that started. And much like the later Fillmore version, it runs a long time. This one goes over 19 minutes. Then before you know it, it moves into the old Big Bill Brunsey number, Feels So Good, with Burton on vocals for another 14 minutes. The tape fades out as Jimi starts Sunshine of Your Love for the second time that day. Later, as Buddy and Tracy Nelson trade vocals back and forth, Jimi starts the riff that would become Message to the Universe and later Message to Love. Tracy sings the lyrics to Train Kept It Rollin' as Jimi starts playing the Power of the Soul riff. He does some of the lyrics that end up in it later in the year. He also does some lyrics from Somewhere or Earth Blues, depending on which you think it is. Then does the verses for Hear My Train A-Comin' in reverse before they move into Voodoo Child a lot quicker than the one from 2 days ago, and with a sax solo. This evolves into what's called a fast jam because they pick up the pace considerably. Along the way, they do a little Outside Women Blues, a little more Sunshine of Your Love before turning it into Come On. A little later, he does the bounciest version of the Star Spangled Banner you'll ever hear. And after 12 and a half minutes, the jam fades out. But it was clear Jimi was having a lot more fun than a few days ago. Exactly 1 week later, the Experience took the stage at the Denver Pop Festival. Things were definitely unsettled. Police had already used tear gas to control the crowd. After an extensive tune-up, they kick into Tax-Free in what appears to be the last time Jimi would ever perform the song. And it was a kickin' version, maybe among the best they ever did. It's at least up there with like L.A. They even tossed in a little bit of the Beatles' Tomorrow Never Knows. Next, they did a song they didn't do in L.A., Hear My Train A-Comin'. The tape starts just before the song does, but captures it in full, and it's also probably among the best the band ever did, much like the ones from the week before. Fire was nice and compact, with Noel pitching in on the chorus. Spanish Castle Magic was one of the expansive ones, running over 10 minutes. Red House was solid, but without the slow, jazzy section prevalent in the LA and San Diego versions. After that, they broke into Foxy Lady with a unique intro, then went right into Star Spangled Banner and finished up with Purple Haze with some cuts in the tape. No Voodoo Child finale, and for good reason. By this point, things began to get out of hand again, and rioting broke out again. Roadie Eric Barrett was able to get a hold of a U-Haul and hid the band in the back. As they were driving out, people were on top of the truck denting the roof, but they made it out alive. Either Mitch or Noel wrote in their books, the three of them like linked arms and felt a real camaraderie as they left the grounds. That lasted until the morning. Noel announced he was leaving the band, ostensibly to work on his own project, Fat Mattress, and not being consulted about Jimi's plan to expand the band to include other musicians. That was partly true, but Noel's frustrations were well documented as far back as January 1968, so it didn't come as a total surprise. Heck, that's why Jimi had Billy Cox waiting in the wings. But as we've discussed, apart from the one interview in February 1970 and the possible pitching in to help for any dates in late September or early October 1970 in Europe, Noel's time with the Experience was finished. A new chapter of Jimi's career was coming very soon. But next episode, we'll be talking about a different phase in Jimi's career, his final days in the studio, namely his own. Next time, we'll go over the Electric Lady sessions from June through August of 1970, what was recorded, and what ended up getting released, or soon to be released. That's next time I Keep On Grooving. Please hit the subscribe button if you like what you're hearing. I'm John Hartshart. Thanks for listening.